So I played the Resident Evil 2 Remake and it was f***ing awesome. It had everything a good zombie horror game needs. Insanely fun, super responsive gameplay, gorgeous visuals, sublime atmosphere, fun storyline with likable characters and great acting, glorious gore, and zombie god. But did it live up to the original 1998 classic? Well, I had to find out, so I played it and I even got my hands on the never released, cancelled actually, early build of RE2, better known as Resident Evil 1.5. So we're gonna check out all of them, study them in detail, and compare them in all aspects. Today I'm here to provide you with the ultimate Resident Evil 2 video on YouTube, so sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 2 of Project Biohazard. The original Resident Evil was a monumental success for Capcom, and development on a sequel had begun just a month after its release. The game they started working on though was not the Resident Evil 2 we know and love today. The basic outline of its plot was similar. It was set 2 months after the events of the first game. Raccoon City has been devastated by the T-virus, and you play as one of 2 characters in their attempt to survive the outbreak and ultimately escape the city. However, a significant portion of the game's aesthetics, sceneries, characters, enemies, items, and weapons were entirely different. Their version of RE2 was actually about 70% completed when it was abruptly cancelled just a mere couple months before release. The developers were simply not satisfied with the product. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. We will take a deep dive into that version that is now known as Resident Evil 1.5 later on in the video. But to truly understand how it differed from the released version, let us first deconstruct the released version and its long-awaited remake.
Leonskennedy, you are?
Claire Redfield.
First of all, let's give a hand to Capcom here. It takes a lot of balls and pride in what you're doing to just straight up scrap something you've worked on for so long just to start from scratch. But that's exactly what they did in the spring of 1997. Roughly a year later, Resident Evil 2 finally hit store shelves to overwhelming critical acclaim and commercial success. It was a cinematic and thrilling experience unlike anything gamers had seen up to that point. Many years later, we were living in the time of reboots, remakes, and remasters. Resident Evil 2 was solidified in the history of gaming as a true classic and one of the greatest video games ever made. The series had seen several mainline installments and countless spin-offs, some brilliant, others less so.
You're right.
The core of what makes a Resident Evil game was vastly altered, and the odds of ever seeing a faithful remake in the vein of the first game were looking slimmer by the day. But then, in 2017, Resident Evil 7 happened, which marked the series' grand return to its survival horror roots.
Fuck!
The following year at E3 2018, 20 years after RE2's release, this happened. So, was it worth the wait? Let's go through both of the Resident Evil 2 games and find out. Two months after the Arklay Mansion incident, the T-virus has rapidly spread across Raccoon City in a catastrophic outbreak that saw most of the inhabitants transform into mindless zombies. The 2 protagonists of this adventure are Leonskennedy, a rookie cop on his first day on the job, and Claire Redfield, a college student looking for her brother, Chris Redfield, from the first game. Before we delve into the plot, I have to mention a significant change that was implemented in the sequel: the zapping system in the A and B scenarios. Basically, unlike the first game where both playable characters would fight the same monsters, solve the same puzzles, and basically have their own independent stories where one of the protagonists is just locked up in a cell during the events of the other protagonist's narrative, here we have a far more interesting system in place. After you finish the game on the A scenario, you can load the B scenario, in which the events are depicted from the other character's perspective. So if you finish the game as Claire on your first run, you can then see what Leon was doing during that time, and vice versa depending on who you picked for the A scenario. Essentially, this means that the script was split into 4 scenarios for 2A and 2B scenarios, making the narratives intertwined. Furthermore, various choices made during the A scenario will directly affect the B scenario. Pretty cool, right? Yeah, they removed that from the remake. Claire and Leon's stories still differ in that they have their own unique subplots, but the choices you make in the A scenario will not affect the B scenario whatsoever. So apart from their respective subplots, where Claire meets Sherry and Leon meets Ada, the narratives will clash and won't be as neatly intersected as they were in the original.
Damn it!
The game begins as Claire and Leon travel to Raccoon City. The first to arrive stops at a diner or a gas station and investigates the surrounding area. It doesn't take long before they notice that things are not quite right here, and before you know it, the entire place is getting flocked by zombies. The second protagonist turns up and helps out. They're forced to steal a police car and head toward the Raccoon Police Department for shelter. In the remake, they come to a dead end inside the city and the car gets swarmed by zombies. In the original, a zombie that bears a striking resemblance to Leon pops out from the back seat and they crash into a pole. Either way, an infected truck driver has lost control and drives full force into their car, causing a huge explosion. With 20 years of technological advancement, the remake's overall presentation is far more intriguing and conveys the same events in a more cinematic and creative way. Like starting the game with the truck driver to give context for how he eventually ended up smashing into our car. Or the following scene where our protagonist stops at a gas station. It's a dark and tense introduction, the eerie calm before the chaotic storm, if you will. In contrast, the original drops you straight into the action after the opening cinematic. Objectively, one is not better than the other, but I personally prefer the extended intro of the remake. As a side note, I'll say that the cutscenes in the remake are in general longer and more captivating, with far better performances across the board, but we'll talk about the acting later. In any case, the explosion separates our protagonists on opposite sides of the fire and they decide to meet at the R.P.D.
I'll meet you at the station!
You'll take a different route to the police station depending on which scenario you're playing. The first to reach the station finds that it has been overrun by zombies and most of the police officers are dead. As we search for survivors, we hear Officer Elliot Edward yelling for help. We attempt to rescue him, but to no avail. He gets viciously torn apart and we are ambushed by more zombies. We work our way back to the main hall and Lieutenant Marvin Branagh emerges and saves us. Marvin is severely injured as he's been bitten and is only encountered alive in the A scenario. He informs us of a secret passageway that we can use to escape, and Claire learns that Chris has left to investigate the Umbrella headquarters in Europe. With no reason to stay, you now have to gain access to the passageway and get the hell out of there. And since this is an RE game, there's only one way to do that, by thoroughly exploring the station and solving various puzzles. The exact tasks will vary depending on which scenario you're playing, and since the B scenario character is the second to arrive, more of the station will be open to you from the get-go. As for differences between the original and the remake, they took the core ideas of the puzzles from the original and sort of expanded on them. I found that the remake's puzzles were more fun and clever, requiring a bit more brainpower from the player. That being said, neither game's puzzles are super difficult. You'll be left scratching your head occasionally, but it never gets frustrating and they're mostly just fun. One of the criticisms the game received was that some of the puzzles were out of place in a police station. Like here, you have to insert a medallion into this specific slot, and the statue drops a key. The game's explanation is that the building used to be an art museum. Don't ask any questions. Personally, I find those quirky elements of the station rather enjoyable. The R.P.D. is one of the coolest locations I've ever had the pleasure of exploring in any video game. Trapped in a giant police station during a zombie outbreak, let's be honest, that's a dope idea for a setting. It was awesome in both games, but they did make some specific changes that I felt were clever. One of them was utilizing darkness. Some sections had no electricity and that certainly contributed to the eeriness of the game. Combine that with blown out pipes, broken windows and heavy rain blowing in, and you have an undeniably scarier atmosphere in the remake.
What in God's name?
You can tell that shit went down here. the entire place felt a lot more devastated in comparison to the original. It's interesting because to me, the exact opposite was true on the streets of Raccoon City in the third game, but that's a conversation for a different day. Of course, the original R.P.D. showed signs of struggle too, like the West Office for instance, but compare that to the West Office of the remake and the contrast is stark. In the same way, the rest of the station is no different. The new R.P.D. is simply more unsettling to be in. It was downright disgusting in certain places with all of the limbs and corpses scattered around. The overall layout of the station was beautifully recreated. It's not a one-to-one copy and some parts of it have been altered more than others. You can clearly tell it's the same place, but it's like an enhanced version of it in the remake. To illustrate, check out the main hall with this nice staircase leading up to the second floor. OG had a ladder in the middle of the room, which looks kind of weird in comparison. So they did a fine job capturing the essence of the original environments, and the liberties taken in certain places are mostly for the sake of realism. Capcom describes this game as more of a reimagination than a remake. Clearly a lot of effort has gone into reimagining it all without sacrificing the essence of the original. Like the R.P.D., most of everything has seen changes at least in some way. Perhaps the most obvious is that the fixed camera angles and tank controls are no longer here. We now have the more traditional third-person over-the-shoulder angle. Admittedly, some of the tension from the original is lost because of this, and I wish the game offered an extra setting for old-school cinematic camera angles. They actually planned to have a fixed camera option, and even experimented with a first-person view, but ultimately decided that the third-person perspective worked best. An extra setting to switch the camera perspective would have been sick though. With the entire game being rendered in 3D, they could have done some neat creative things with the camera, with it panning along with your movement. As the player draws the weapon, it could switch dynamically to an over-the-shoulder angle, as shot placement is vital in the remake. Speaking of that, RE2Make's gunplay is the best in the series by far. Even later installments like Village can't touch this shit. They absolutely crushed it with the gunplay. It's ridiculously fun and satisfying. Enemies will react to each individual bullet realistically, and strategic shot placement adds a whole new element of decision making to the game. Zombies will absorb a lot of bullets with the standard handgun, so you'll have to decide if it's worth engaging at all. That is if you can resist the combat, because again, it's so damn good. Headshots are not insta-kills, and zombies can take up to 7 or more bullets to the head sometimes. When they do finally go down, you might want to give them an extra slice with a knife, because a lot of times they'll pop right back up, so make sure they're down for good. You can get lucky and score a critical hit, which you have a higher chance of hitting if you wait for the reticle to get smaller before firing. You could also shoot off their legs or arms, or both, to incapacitate the zombie and render them harmless. The dismemberment, gore, and damage system is easily the most comprehensive I've ever seen. Killing zombies in games should naturally be fun and rewarding, and it has never, ever been better than here. I'm not kidding. In my opinion, this is the first time Capcom totally nailed it. Every shot does dynamic damage, and you can feel the impact of every single bullet. Blood realistically splatters all over the place, clothing will tear dynamically. Aside from the obvious limb dismemberment, pieces of flesh will rip apart, exposing the organs and bones. It looks like everything inside the body, from the skeleton to the organs, has been modeled in detail in 3D, and you're free to blast away and tear it apart piece by piece. On top of that, all damage feels like it's correlated precisely to where you place the bullet. It's very impressive from a technological standpoint as well, and I was bummed out when I noticed that it has been massively toned down in the RE3 make. But that's a conversation for a different day. Let's not forget the physics, which are equally important for satisfying shooting, in my opinion at least. Personally, I've never been too fond of shooting things in RE games, especially in those that relied heavily on it, like RE5 or 6.
What are you talking about?
The reason is simple: repetitive animations. I'm not a fan of these clunky animations for falling bodies. They felt outdated even by 2009 standards. Boy, did they fix that here. Finally, proper ragdoll physics have been implemented into the engine. It's like a perfect combination of scripted animations mixed with ragdoll physics, and the result is that shooting things here never gets old. Bodies will collapse realistically, reacting to the environment and even piling on top of each other. Again, sadly this is something that they never did as good even in later installments. So please, Capcom, Do it right for the RE4 remake, please. Another really impressive thing about the remake is that the bodies you leave behind never disappear. Every single corpse will lie exactly where you left it, exactly as you left it. So throughout the game you'll be constantly reminded of the mess you've made as you run past your dismembered foes. I once left a knife wedged in a zombie's head in the library, and I came back to it towards the end of the game. Not only was the zombie exactly where I left it, I was able to retrieve the knife as well. I love small details like that in games. It does so much for immersion in the fictional world. Speaking of immersion, the extremely fluid animations don't hurt either. Everything from switching weapons to how your gear bounces around as you run looks great in motion. The cherry on top is that the animations are smooth without sacrificing the responsiveness of the gameplay. It looks and plays like a dream. All of this is possible thanks to the brand new engine that Capcom built for Resident Evil 7, the Reach for the Moon engine, better known as the RE engine, which has quickly become one of my favorite game engines. Goes without saying that games running on this engine look outstanding. I'd go as far as saying that the RE2 make is one of the most beautiful looking games on the market, period. The incredible detail in the environments and the lighting really stood out to me. It's exceptional. The textures are so clean, even from up close. It's actually absurd how far in-game visuals have come. Remember seeing these pre-rendered cutscenes and how mind-blowing they were back in the day? You know what? The vanilla game still looks great, especially the seamless HD project version, which shows off the gorgeous pre-rendered backgrounds in all their glory. Mad props to the people who did this. I sincerely enjoyed your work. Seamless or not though, good art is timeless art, and the game still holds up incredibly well today. Check out how the light bounces off of Sherry here. For a 1998 game, it looks unbelievable, with fluid animations that were way ahead of its time, and satisfying gameplay in general. It was a survival horror title through and through, and the remake does not disappoint in this aspect either. Scarce ammo and supplies, limited inventory slots, item boxes, ink ribbons, and typewriters, everything makes a return, and it honestly works better than ever. Grenades and knives can now be used manually or as defensive weapons. With the addition of gunpowders to craft different kinds of ammo and the new healing abilities of herbs, you now have a more robust system to work with. I was very happy and frankly surprised to learn that nothing was dumbed down in that sense. On the contrary, it was built upon. The enemies in the remake felt like more serious threats. The nastiest looking zombies yet, and they're relentless. They'll break in through doors to follow you and climb over obstacles in their way. Dogs are quicker and more agile than ever, and lickers do not around. So in conjunction with a creepier atmosphere, the result is a more effective horror game overall. Getting back to the story, exploring the R.P.D, a number of interesting events have taken place. We ran into our first licker, solved puzzles, witnessed a police helicopter crash, stopped for some chit-chat, more puzzles, put the fire out, and met Umbrella's latest toy, the Tyrant, also known as Mr. X. It has better intelligence and recovery ability than its predecessor from the first game, and has been sent here to recover the G-Virus and take out any and all survivors. Mr. X was one of the highlights of the game for me. Everything from his design to his movement is perfect. The way he just intensely walks towards you instead of running is so much more intimidating. He relentlessly follows you around the station, and you don't want to get caught by this guy. Hearing his footsteps closing in on you is genuinely unnerving, and I love it.
Jesus, stay back!
Now this guy was in the original too, but not nearly as terrifying. The reason is simple, he didn't follow you to other rooms. For instance, here he bursts through the wall, and all I have to do is get out of there, and that's it. he's gone. Now I can casually walk away and okay. But except this one time here, he doesn't do that, I promise. Also, he's just not present for the vast majority of the time. He'll show up on a few occasions, but then you won't see him for a long while. As far as his looks go, he was definitely more handsome in the original. Look at that smooth face. Whereas in the remake, he's got this scrambled face thing going on and his eyes are just empty. Anyway, next we find the 3 medallions for the main hall statue and open up the secret passageway underneath it. Leon tries to get Marvin to come along, but he insists that it's too late and asks you to leave him. I have to mention the actors' performances here, because this is some of the finest acting I've seen in a Resident Evil game.
It's too late. I tried, Leon, but I couldn't stop it. We can't let this thing spread. It's on you now. Just go.
These newer RE Engine games seem to be leaning more towards realism, and I for one welcome this change. The facial animations are top-notch and the performances come to life through the detailed character models. They must have hired some new writers as well, because the dialogue is a lot more convincing now.
I won't let you down, Marvin.
Gone are the days of extremely cheesy, cringy dialogue and voice acting.
I'm sorry. I failed you.
Scenes like this can be charming, of course, but it's very hard to relate to the characters or feel any emotional connection to them. It seems only natural that the acting talent corresponds with the high-level tech they're working with now. I actually felt for Marvin in this scene, and Leon's heroic personality comes across as sincere in a sort of adorable way.
That's good.
He's believable as this young, naive, rookie cop who just wants to save the day and help people.
Yeah, well, I was supposed to start last week, and I got a call to stay away. I wish I'd come here sooner.
He's genuinely likable in this game, and so is Claire.
Any luck with your brother?
No, not yet.
Claire, don't lose hope. I'm sure we're gonna find him.
Her performance was terrific as well, and she's kind of a badass. Courageous and feisty, she didn't take no shit and did not back down from a challenge. Also, I like the fact that despite the better acting, the voices still sound like their 1998 counterparts.
Let's split up, look for any survivors, and get out of here.
Right.
The original voice acting with all the cheese and awkward delivery was still a huge improvement over the first game.
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
What's interesting though is that back in the day, the narrative was described as engrossing, dramatic, and like a product out of Hollywood, and the dialogue as well-written and spellbinding. The cutscenes were called a work of art, the backgrounds as rendered to perfection, and the animations fluid and eerie, as well as having reached true realism. Those are all actual quotes from reviewers in the 90s, which is kinda cute. I would, however, attribute all of those descriptions to the remake today, but in about 20 years some other jabroni will be making a video on Resident Evil 18 and calling my praise cute. Of course, for its time, Resident Evil 2 was an actually mind-blowing cinematic experience, and quite frankly, it still holds up incredibly well. So, being able to attribute all of those descriptions to the remake today just goes to show that it truly is a worthy remake to a legendary game. So, Marvin convinces us to leave him behind. We enter the underground tunnel that leads to the station's basement levels, with the parking lot and the jail cells. Here's where Leon and Claire's character-unique subplots really start. Claire meets a little girl named Sherry Birkin, who's looking for her mom and is seemingly on the run from some sort of creature. The creature in question is this thing, G1, our first boss battle. We survive the encounter and together with Sherry make our way toward the parking lot. The parking lot is where Leon meets Ada Wong for the first time. She's a mysterious woman and doesn't reveal much of anything. In the original, she claimed to be looking for her boyfriend John, but that detail was omitted in the remake for some reason. After a short conversation, Leon enters the prison section and locates Ben Bertolucci stuck in a cell. He informs us of Umbrella's control over police chief Brian Irons, but Leon's not having it.
Hopefully he's somebody's dinner by now.
What do you mean by that?
He's the bastard that locked me in here.
I'm sure he had a good reason.
In a shocking turn of events, Mr. X blasts through a wall and performs one of the gnarliest executions I've ever seen. Ada returns and explains that Ben was an informant that had valuable information, implying that he was telling the truth about Chief Irons. Leon spots a permit for the parking lot gate and needs to find a way inside the cell to open it. Meanwhile, Claire and Sherry arrive to the parking lot, looking to escape, when they get interrupted by Chief Irons. Clearly corrupted and disturbed, he kidnaps Sherry at gunpoint and takes her to the Raccoon City Orphanage. Claire is pissed off, but there's not much she can do at the moment. She collects the pendant that Sherry dropped on her way out and now needs to open the gate somehow. We find a way up to Irons' office where more disturbing facts are revealed about him. He has an obsession with taxidermy, as is evident from the decor in this place. At some point he moved on from animals to humans, with young women as his primary victims. Indeed, the corruption rumors were valid too, as Irons was on Umbrella's payroll and is even responsible for shutting down STARS after the mansion incident to prevent them from investigating into the matter any further. He placed STARS officer Jill Valentine under a month of house arrest to halt her investigation and buy Umbrella enough time to neutralize her. He concealed information on Umbrella's development of the Golgotha, or G-virus, a retrovirus in the progenitor family. It was made to both rival and surpass the T-virus and is far more advanced in its effects of genetic mutations, capable of repairing dead cells and reviving the dead. Chief Irons finally suffered a total mental breakdown when he was alerted to the T-virus leaking into the city's water supply. He imagined himself to be infected and vowed to take everybody down with him, including the mayor's daughter, Catherine Warren, whom he planned to turn into taxidermy. Just another government official, basically. In the back office, Claire gets a hold of the keycard for the parking lot gate. Suddenly, the phone rings. It's Chief Irons and he wants Sherry's pendant, but doesn't reveal why. Claire agrees to meet him for an exchange and heads towards the orphanage. The Raccoon City Orphanage is a new location added to the remake. It was a secret Umbrella facility where they conducted experiments on children. In this section, we play as Sherry in her attempt to escape shortly before Claire arrives. First we solve a little puzzle to escape from this bedroom, next we head downstairs, but the main entrance door is locked. We have no choice but to enter Irons' quarters, and what I assume is his main office. Catherine Warren's body is out on full display here, so you can imagine what sort of things went down in this place. Sherry reaches for the key but gets spotted, then in a desperate act splashes the chief in the face with some sort of chemical solution.
Shit!
Justifiably frightened, Sherry runs back upstairs and hides. Irons, now furious, goes looking for her, but he needs to use the bathroom to wash his face. Sherry seizes the opportunity to grab the key and rushes back downstairs, only to discover that the door is chained shut from the outside. Game over. The despicable chief catches up to her. Unfortunately for him, that was a big mistake. We regain control of Claire as she traverses the Raccoon City streets on her way to the orphanage. We kill a few zombies, a few dogs, before reaching the place. Chief Irons' miserable existence comes to a halt in front of Claire as the G embryo rips through his torso. Claire climbs down through a hatchway in his office where she finds Sherry. The Tyrant emerges and tails them to an elevator as they barely make it inside. He almost got him, but is then impaled and killed by the G mutant, who has now mutated into his second form. The elevator falls crashing down into Umbrella's sewer facility. This part of the game played out a bit different in the original. Claire first spotted Sherry running around at R.P.D, but never caught up to her. Then, after putting out the helicopter fire and detonating a C4 explosive planted to the door next to it, she was able to access Chief Irons' office, where she had a short but strange conversation with him. He wasn't immediately hostile toward us like in the remake, but rather politely asked us to leave him alone. In the back office, Claire found Sherry again and comforted her. After warning us of the creature that's after her, she ran away, which she had a habit of doing in the original. Shortly thereafter, Claire found her again, this time in the basement. It didn't take long before she ran away again, and her little segment starts here. Get a hold of a key as Sherry and throw it back to Claire. Following that, Claire solves a puzzle with these 3 stones that opens up a secret passage down to Chief Irons' dungeon. The chief gets planted with a G embryo moments before Claire gets there. Once she does, he confronts her at gunpoint, but is then met with the same fate as in the remake. There's a pathway to the sewers down here that Claire follows, subsequently running into Sherry again. The little shit runs off again and gets herself into big trouble. The G mutant is down here and he plants her with an embryo, infecting her with the G virus. I prefer the orphanage section over this for a few reasons. First of all, It seems more fitting that a child would cling on to Claire for safety until getting literally physically separated. Second, her running away like an idiot only makes her annoying in the player's eyes, thus giving us less incentive to care about her. Third, the orphanage was a cool idea as an umbrella facility in disguise, and just plain better than Sherry's really short section getting chased by dogs or zombies. Not to mention it establishes Chief Iron's morbid character traits more effectively. Sure, his super obvious bad guy entrance might be a bit excessive, but I feel that this subplot was overall executed better in the remake. And likewise, Claire and Sherry's bond was a whole lot more believable. Alright, let's get back to our boy Leon and see what he's been up to. He figures out a way to restore power to the cells and acquires the key card together with Ben's tape recorder.
They want to know about the G virus and a big f***ing sinkhole in the city, which, by the way, rumor has it goes straight to your underground lab.
On his way out, all of the cells housing the zombies open. As if that wasn't enough, the Tyrant joins in on the fun as well. You know what? If you want to avoid situations like this, go ahead and kill anything trapped in a cell in a Resident Evil game. Trust me. Out in the parking lot, Ada saves Leon's ass again. She rams Mr. X with a police van and blows it up for good measure.
Nothing dies down here.
She then reveals that she's an FBI agent investigating Dr. Annette Birkin, who's supposedly responsible for the outbreak. Leon decides to team up with Ada on her mission to bring down Annette, and the duo leave the police station together. The road's out, so they break into a nearby gun shop to get through to the other side. The owner, Robert Kendo, confronts them. He expresses his anger and disappointment over the R.P.D's failure in controlling the situation. His young daughter, on the verge of mutating, comes out and we get another heartbreaking scene.
I was sleeping, honey. Okay? And I'm gonna put you to bed too, okay? Emma.
Damn, this shit hit me right in the feels. Again, I'm not used to Resident Evil delivering powerful, dramatic scenes like this, so this caught me off guard. We leave Kendo to his sorrows and move on down to the sewers.
I want to find out what's happening here and stop whoever's behind it. Helping people like them? That's why I joined the force.
We stumble into a gigantic mutant alligator. Leon barely escapes from the hideous creature as, luckily for him, he bites into an explosive pipe. He is reunited with Ada and they proceed deeper into the sewers. You might have noticed that Mr. X was back for Leon even though he was killed in Claire's run. That's what I was talking about, with the narratives clashing in the remake.
How did this happen?
The original was more consistent with stuff like this. The basement section in general was slightly different in the original though. Leon and Ada confront Ben in the prison, who refuses to leave his cell out of fear of the monsters. Thereupon in the underground, Leon and Ada get separated as she climbs through a shaft. On the other side, she secures a pendant that Sherry dropped while running away. Staying in a cell was not the best idea for Ben after all, as he gets violently mauled by G, not the Tyrant. Thereupon we reach the sewers, where Leon squares off against the G-Mutant and reunites with Ada. The part with Kendo, the gun shop owner, was in the very beginning of the original game before the R.P.D. You'd meet him as both Claire and Leon in their A scenarios. There was no mention of his daughter and his character was kind of creepy in a predatory way.
But don't you worry, girlie. You'll be safe in here. I'm keeping a close eye on things.
Moreover, the road to R.P.D. lasted a little longer too, whereas in the remake they moved some of those outside locations to when you first leave the station. Locations like the basketball court, the bus, and Kendo's gun shop. The giant alligator encounter occurred a bit further on in the story in the vanilla game. It was kind of dumbed down in the remake actually. Here you had the choice of knocking over this gas tank to kill the beast, or you could avoid confrontation altogether. If you didn't kill it, you'd have to face it with the other character in the B scenario. In the remake, it only shows up in Leon's playthrough and there's no thinking involved. You just run away in a semi-scripted event and fire a shot to finish it off.
Chew on that.
Apparently they were working on a few different ideas for this part, one of which included an entire level where you'd evade and lure the alligator into a trap of sorts. Sounds cool to me, but the developers felt that it was best to simplify the encounter. Now the zapping system is entirely missing in the remake. Other examples of it include if Marvin is killed in A, he will not appear in B, and vice versa. At some point I had the choice of picking up an SMG and a side pack as Claire. I took the SMG but left the side pack for Leon. This system was really cool and is sorely missing in the remake. It stands as one of the strongest arguments for preferring the original. Without the inclusion of the zapping system, I almost wish they had just done a single story for each character, focusing instead on making the two stories as tight as possible without worrying about the A and B scenarios. The scenarios are constantly retconning each other anyway, so perhaps it would have been better with just two super polished runs. Maybe then they wouldn't have had to cut the chemical plant either. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below.
Wake up! Wake up!